This is not a video I expected to be doing. Now, for those of you that have been here a while, you know that I have ridden hardcore for Cheryl Miller in appreciation of how she has handled Caitlin Clark entering the WNBA, which sounds kind of bizarre because Cheryl Miller had nothing to do with the WNBA. She's just a former, very famous, very good ex basketball player who's been asked about Caitlin Clark, obviously, and who coached Caitlin Clark in the 2024 All Star game. And it just seemed, as crazy as it sounds when we're talking about a basketball player, a very unproblematic basketball player, right? I remember back in 2024, there were tweets online where people were going like, people talk about Caitlin Clark's fans being all obsessive or a cult or this or that. I don't know if y'all remember this, but back in 2024, when Caitlin Clark, during her rookie campaign, there were people online going back through her social media accounts all the way to when they started, right? Because that's where we are in this day and age. We're gonna see something a 24-year-old, 25-year-old, even 30-year-old says now that we don't really like, and then we're going to go back and try and find something when they were 12 or 13 or 14 and be like, oh, we have to ruin their life because they said that thing when they were 12 that I don't like. Right? That's where we're at. I've seen it done. And there were actually Caitlin Clark haters, the slows, the hatelins, the low IQ idiots being like, I can't find anything. She's not problematic in any way, shape, or form. She hasn't said anything I can use against her. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. So that is the atmosphere that all this was surrounding all of this. So as bizarre as it sounds in talking about an athlete who's that unproblematic, it's insane to use the word. I hate to use the word. And uh, I don't know if any of you all saw Lone Survivor, the movie. I just caught it again the other day. I'd actually read the book when it came out, and the only reason I bring that up, you're probably like, dude, you're ADD. You're going into left field again. It's just I was going to use the word brave to describe Cheryl Miller saying positive things about Caitlin Clark, which sounds insane because the men and women who do things for their country like that in Lone Survivor are actually what the word brave should be reserved for. Don't end a sentence like that. But anyway, sorry, Mom. It's crazy, but yeah, I don't know what else the word to use. But Cheryl Miller has been very, very brave. Well, Cheryl Miller apparently now, she's got a media spot, so I guess she has to change her tune. And the reason I talk about riding hardcore for Cheryl Miller because now I've got to go the other way. After that brouhaha with Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark, where again, if you watch it, it's all Stephanie White, right? Like Caitlin Clark was being quiet until she reacted, which I'm guessing Stephanie White said something about defense, and Caitlin Clark reacted about having her hands up, which she did. The calls were terrible. Stephanie White wouldn't defend Caitlin Clark. The coach of the Fire challenged 2 foul calls against his players, and won both of those challenges, got the calls reversed. Those calls were more likely to not be reversed than the ones against Caitlin Clark that Stephanie White did nothing for. But Cheryl Miller, now in a new role, had to talk about the incident. And it's very interesting, some of the things she says here. So let's take a brief listen to this because this clip is not all that long. Here we go.
From what you're seeing, what's happening in Indianapolis?
Right now, it's frustration, and unfortunately, it's boiling over, and it's being seen. It's one thing to have it behind closed doors, but when it spills over and when the coach has to basically say, hey, you know what, Caitlin, enough is enough. This is too disruptive. In and out, take a seat. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's frustration. I'm not like the best lip reader, but I feel like Stephanie White did say defense a couple times. And Caitlin Clark was in foul trouble this game, and obviously we know how things are being called. So I think it is a lot of frustration, but it's also like not that crazy. This isn't the first time we've seen this. It doesn't have some deeper meaning to it. I've had moments like that with coaches. I think it speaks to relationships, player-coach relationships. Like, shout out Brian Agler. You could say anything to that man, and you could keep it moving. And then I had other coaches where maybe you couldn't, and you have to learn each other in that way.
But you knew
Steph
the
got
line.
mad.
But you
Yeah,
knew
Steph-
you knew the line when it becomes disruptive, and then when you and that's when even. Kelsey Mitchell kind of chimed in and said, like, you need to go stand over
For
here
sure.
and let us just, regain calm in our huddle. When it becomes that disruptive to the entire team, somebody has to step in.
From what you're seeing, what's happening in Indianapolis?
Wow. Okay. So I hate all of this. No, not all of this. Here's what's wild. But again, to be consistent, I like to be consistent. Again, if you've been here a while, not a huge Sue Bird fan. I think she's a bit of a snake. And to be fair, I judge a lot of that on the fact that, to me, she spent 10 years with one of the absolute worst person, in my opinion, on the planet. When you're talking about, people, obviously you talk about dictators and people like that, and people who like to unalive other people. I get it. I'm putting it into context, in terms of celebrities and athletes and stuff like that. I don't have a positive word to say about Megan Rapinoe. And as someone who actually doesn't know her personally, I know her as well as anyone possibly could outside of that. I've met her. I've been at U.S. Women's National Team training sessions. I know who Megan Rapinoe is, and I question Sue Bird's judgment, although they have now split. So, and I think Sue Bird tries to balance that line of not wanting to alienate Caitlin Clark fans, but she's still kind of old guard WNBA. But I didn't have a problem with anything Sue said. I'm going to be fair that now I do think that, again, this confrontation was a little different above and beyond the confrontation Sue Bird is talking about. But in general, I agree with what Sue Bird is saying here. And I also appreciate, I didn't mention this in a previous video, I meant to, is, Stephanie White, in responding, went straight to victimhood of, if this were the NBA, woe is me, I'm a woman. If this was the NBA, we wouldn't even be talking about. That's not true. Conversations like that in the NBA, when they happen, they are huge news. People talk about it. People debate them. The shows debate them. The fans debate them. People pick sides. It is big news when you have a superstar and a coach get to do that type of confrontation in the NBA. It is 100% big news. So Stephanie White went right to the victim card. I appreciate Sue Bird not going there. Now, having said that, I am beyond disappointed that Cheryl Miller had the analysis that she had here, doing nothing but throwing Caitlin Clark under the bus, being it all on Caitlin Clark. It was all Caitlin Clark's fault. Caitlin Clark's being disruptive. Now, again, you watch that, and look, no one knows what was being said, so we can only see the body language. We can see how angry Stephanie White is, but she was doing all the talking, right? That Caitlin Clark was sitting there. There was no disruption from Caitlin Clark. It was Stephanie White humiliating her star player in front of the entire team for no other reason than Stephanie White's own complete incompetence as a head coach. Now, keep in mind when this was. This is when Caitlin Clark got yanked out of the game 3.5 minutes into it. Okay? So the Fever, I think it was 8-4 when she got yanked, but they were up 8-2. Those 8 points came from a Caitlin Clark bucket and 3 absolutely beautiful Caitlin Clark assists. And those 3 buckets were layups. Okay? That is when Stephanie White yanked Caitlin Clark. That hot start by Caitlin Clark, is the context in which Stephanie White is acting like an absolute lunatic here in embarrassing and humiliating her star player, who is the reason that they had that hot start and were winning. And then she had the balls, or lack thereof, to lie about it after the game and said, oh, no, that's our normal rotation. And of course, the pathetic, disgusting Fever media, who basically are just propagandists for the regime, did not ask the obvious follow-up question. Well, we've got all the numbers here, and you are lying to us. This is not when you normally take Caitlin Clark out. So do you want to give us the real answer? Because we're tired of you saying crap and lying constantly and never being held accountable for your lies. You're lying right now. Why are you lying? Please revise your answer. And you keep on it because that's your job. Stephanie White says whatever Stephanie White wants because she knows none of you do a damn thing about it. Suck it up and do your job. And Cheryl made an assumption about Kelsey Mitchell. Now, here's the thing. I do think Kelsey Mitchell piled on, right? She's the priority, right? She's Stephanie White's new little toy. And she was also piling on Caitlin Clark. But I don't know that she was saying what Cheryl Miller was saying. Cheryl Miller's making a lot of assumptions there. But this was incredibly disappointing to see Cheryl Miller take this stance where she put all of this, you heard that, all of this on Caitlin Clark. She did nothing to say Stephanie White handled this poorly. Yet, if you watch the video, it is clearly this is all coming from Stephanie White. And again, I put it in the context of the hot start. It was all Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark gets pulled here, and that is what lost the game. Stephanie White got all up in her feels. Stephanie White got all pissy and prissy. Stephanie White doesn't like the fact that her star player knows basketball far better than she does. And this emotional move by Stephanie White lost her team the game. This is where the game was lost. Hot start for the Fever. Caitlin Clark with a bucket. The team with 3 easy layups because of incredible Caitlin Clark passes. Stephanie White gets pissy, takes Caitlin Clark out of the game. The Fire go on like a 19-2 run. I think it was 15-2 while Caitlin Clark sat on the bench for an eternity. And the Fever never recovered. And now they're sitting outside of the playoffs if the season were to end today. And unfortunately, Cheryl Miller has decided to cash the check the way so many influencers now have flipped and are hardcore riding for the Indiana Fever in the front office. Stephanie White can do no wrong, passively aggressively, constantly attacking Caitlin Clark's fan base, insinuating they're more moral, they're more intelligent. The influencers, not the Caitlin Clark fans, which is getting exhausting in its own right. And I'm really trying to stay out of going after other creators specifically, but at some point they're gonna have to dial it back a little bit. I'm just saying because I'm bringing receipts. We always bring receipts. I'm gonna bring receipts on Stephanie White's nonsense in another video. But yeah, it's really disappointing to hear Cheryl Miller say all this. This is not. I don't believe this is what she would say if she was like a guest on someone's podcast. But here she is, obviously being part of the media now and jumping in on, hey, here's your check, Cheryl Miller. Here's your opportunity, Cheryl Miller. Here are some stances you're going to need to take if you want to stay in this club and continue. And Cheryl Miller said, okay. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe. Truly do appreciate it. I will talk to y'all later.